On today's episode of the Weird Gig Podcast, we hear stories of a weird wedding. Hashtag everything is jobbing. And what up, Paul Giamatti? We are here with Zoey Witz and Scott Anderson, also known as Herm. Zoey is a fantastic guitarist on the scene, and Scott Anderson, a trumpet player.
Yeah, so I'm a freelance guitar player, Chicago-based, and freelance musicians play a lot of weddings and corporate parties. Generally, they're pretty fancy affairs. So we're used to that. Like every time we walk into one of those gigs, they're generally fancy enough that we don't really bat an eyelash when it's fancy. This one, though, I didn't think much of it at the time, but a few days before, we had to sign a non-disclosure agreement to play this particular gig.
Totally.
And is this gentleman the gentleman who's getting married, or is it a father of the bride?
He was getting married.
He was getting married.
I mean, I would imagine his father probably died in like the 30s.
Things got weird right away. I rolled up to the gig. I think it was like a block over from where the gig was actually happening. So I roll up, put my flashers on, and I start unloading. Immediately, like several gentlemen converged on my car and very tersely told me that I would not be allowed to park my car there.
As far as I know, there was no traffic going in either direction, in any direction, north, south, or east or west.
Okay.
For like a 6-block radius.
Politely said, well, I'm playing at this wedding, so I just need to unload my equipment. And they're like, yeah, no. Okay, so you know how when you're walking into a wedding, typically like everything looks pretty fancy. It looks, and me personally, I'm an extremely non-observant person. Like I don't notice anything ever. Like ever. So even
including volume.
Oh, definitely not volume. Pretty oblivious to my own personal volume.
Right on.
Both talking and when I'm playing. The fixtures on the tables, they looked like Donald Trump's apartment.
Okay.
Like
the
everything was like solid gold.
Lots of really dark wood.
And it just looked like very old and like obviously expensive, like way more than you'd expect normally.
Maybe like an Illuminati meeting area. Is kind of what it reminded me of.
Kind of strange symbols everywhere, like on the ceiling, on the walls. It was just the weirdest scene ever.
Normally at these events, it's usually a minimum of about 500 people.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were about 40 people there.
So it's small.
Small.
And I think they all worked for him. So there weren't any it wasn't like friends and family. It was just
people who had an obligation to be there, financial obligation to be there.
Well, yeah. I mean, he had to have his team of lawyers, I would imagine, at one table in case anything were to go wrong that night. I mean, and everybody, I mean, like I said, the guy was, or Zoe mentioned it as well, the guy he's old, very old. So
he was old.
Even the people that work with him are people that probably should have already been retired.
Gotcha.
They don't work with him; they work for him. That was the dynamic. So you have to understand, like, it's at these events, it's always, you can tell who's spending the money. It's the parents of the bride or the parents of the groom. You can always tell because people crowd around them and like, oh, thank you for the event.
Sure.
But this wasn't like that at all. It was more like everybody knew exactly what their place was, and so no one talked, no one said anything. There was no like communication. There was no sidling up at the bar like, how you doing, Rob? And it was nothing. It was just like
weird.
Everyone just sat in their chairs and waited to be cued until they were allowed to speak.
I guess things didn't get weird until the event started happening. it was just like not typical rich person's wedding. The man's bride had to be no older than
Around 30.
yes.
I, being the age I am in my 40s, looked at her and was like, oh my God, she's really young. Like, she looked, I mean, her, you know, when your parents are there, her parents look like us.
Oh boy.
I mean, they were maybe more like Zoe. They had some grays. We still have our color, but
I have some gray
They
in my
weren't-
beard, so
they weren't, you know, 70-year-old parents like my wife's parents. They were probably maybe late 50s, early 60s. There was dinner music, but it had to be nothing, you know, nothing you normally do. Like you couldn't do a Roberta Flack tune, or you couldn't do anything like that. It was we kind of played kind of more Frank Sinatra-y type tunes. I think the vocalists in the group had to learn a bunch of jazz tunes that, of course, they're not used to singing that often and uncomfortable with. So, of course, you have to remember, like, everybody's got a particular job they have to do when they show up to play the gig, on top of a request and whatever else it is. And this, because of the age of the groom, everybody has to learn a whole bunch of material that they don't know. And then, of course, we don't know where we're going to play any of it because everything, it's like so hush hush. I mean, it was like no one was allowed to know anything. No one was allowed to know. I wasn't allowed to put my case on the floor. Like you can't set your horn down. Like, well, where do you want me to do that? You know?
Yeah.
Just one thing after the next.
I said I was like something like, dude, this is some fucking weird ass shit, and he was like, totally. Oh my God, who are these people? An enormous amount of speeches, though, like just one speech after another, after another, after another. And the thing that strikes my memory is that none of the people seem to know the groom that well, but they were sort of like, it felt like they were
employees.
It felt like they were like required to get up and be like, so I went to school with X, that's about it. like there wasn't.
I mean, and even the speeches, it was like, we're gonna hear from Bob, and you know, that's just a random name. You all know Bob in accounting, like that kind of.
Oh wow. It was that like these are the people that work for this guy.
I mean, the Bob doesn't know the guy sitting next to Jim because Jim works on the yacht and Bob works in the accounting firm.
Whoa.
So but they all work for you. So to Zoe's point about the speeches, they were I remember this so well. It was so bizarre. The guy told, you know how normally during a speech from a family member or a best man, a friend, a close personal family friend, or whatever it might be, there's always some like funny stories. I remember when we were growing up and we fell out of a tree or whatever it is.
Sure.
And he said, well, I remember when Mr. X took us all to Monaco. And I mean, we had to work. We were on the boat, but like stories like that. I mean, it was just
Gotcha.
one.
So one very odd story that one gentleman brought up, I guess it was before Mr. X had really struck it rich, when he was in his formative years, because I guess the guy was a self-made guy. He did not come from wealth.
Okay.
But he said something to the effect, I don't know if you remember this, Herm. He said like, yeah, so X was kind of a eccentric fellow. I seem to remember when he was younger, living in his first apartment, that he would keep his books in his refrigerator.
There was money in it.
So these are people like giving, like, hey, here's a toast to the groom.
Yes.
I remember he kept his books in the refrigerator. Toast to him.
I
There was
remember
no
the
family for the bride.
Right. Oh,
Just
other than
okay.
her
Yeah,
parents, right?
Her parents were there. Okay.
That's it. I don't
What-
think anybody
Was
else.
she from the U.S.?
No.
Latvia.
Okay.
Okay.
20-something Latvian bride.
Okay. Plot thickens.
Okay.
Real tall, dark hair, absolutely gorgeous. English was maybe
Melania level.
Melania level
maybe,
English.
maybe a
Gotcha.
little less.
Melania-esque.
Maybe
Yes.
not as good as Melania.
Probably
Okay.
not. But still
Yeah.
best.
Dinner's really long, to my recollection.
Yeah.
I don't think we got food.
I don't think we were allowed to leave the stage.
I think we were very much continuous that night.
Okay, so continuous meaning you played without a break the whole show
Yes.
for hours.
And usually it's kind of relaxed. Like, usually if you're continuous, you'll get like 5 minutes to go off and eat your sandwich that they give you.
Right.
But I think I don't remember, but I don't remember getting fed that night.
I remember not being able to leave.
Yes.
Oh yeah, it was
We'd like you guys to play music, but we'd like you to not have any bodily functions or be able to.
I'd like you to not have your humanity intact while you do
Gotcha.
this thing.
Gotcha.
Oh, I mean, it definitely went way over time. Like, it was like, I think we were booked for 3 hours, and I think we knew ahead of time that it could go overtime, but it was like, it went way over time.
Because they were partying so hard?
Because the proceedings went so slowly, and like, so I'm pretty sure it was like a 6-hour thing.
Oh, jeez.
Pretty sure it was at least 5 hours.
So
But we were
paid out
expecting
gas
3,
too.
but it was like 5 or 6. It was an extremely long slug. I think at some point it was like a fairly normal dance party.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember a lot of dancing. I just remember when you're in the heat of battle, you just open the floodgates and you job all over everybody. That's kind of what happened. There wasn't the normal occurrence of, this happens, dinner is served, salad comes out, maybe you play a couple songs of the dance set, they go and sit back down, we play a little bit of dinner music, so the next entree comes out, we play another little dance set. It wasn't like the New York style wedding at all. It was once we finally got rolling after the 2.5 hours of guys just kind of talking about where they were on the job when they either met him or, well, I remember I started working for X in like 1964 and
Jeez.
like
Right.
things like that, and then
Right.
they had kind of a first dance and everyone just kind of watched, and then Dan's like, well, do we just play? Dan is the band leader. And I said, well, because I'm the MD, so I'm standing right next to him, and I said, well, maybe we should try.
The weirdest speech was at some point he had very young daughters. The gentleman was in his 70s at least, but his daughters were 12 or 13. Yeah, he had 2 daughters that were very young, and he made them get up and make a speech about how happy they were that he was marrying the wonderful, what's her name?
Oh boy.
That speech, it was so like,
I'm gonna call her Melania.
he made a speech himself, and he seemed like a very, very odd person. I'm very odd myself, so I'm pretty charitable as when it comes to other people's oddness or what have you. But he seemed like a very odd man.
Because we've all been we've all done thousands of weddings, right?
Yeah,
And we've
yeah.
all can immediately tell in the first 15 minutes if this couple's going to stay together or not.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely.
It wasn't that. It wasn't like they're getting divorced like you normally do.
No, it wasn't.
I mean, it wasn't that. But you could be like, what is happening? You're just trying to figure out, like, did he buy her? I don't even remember a lot of people being there towards the end. It was like we did all this overtime, but then it was just the parents, the couple, Mel and Mr. X, and then like maybe like 6 or 7 people. I mean, it wasn't. There was only like 40 there to begin with.
It's been my experience that when you're playing weddings, like the wealthier they are, the least amount of fun they actually can have. Like weddings at the peninsula were always terrible because it was just like they're just so rich and stiff and white that they
Right.
can't cut loose. Whereas like if you play like a banquet hall in like Orland Park, Like,
Exactly.
Mhm.
you know, where he's a cop and she's a nurse. Like, it's a party.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's people puking before dinner.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
fights. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the cops show up.
After we did this gig, I was obsessed with this guy. I was like, I need to find out who he is because that was the weirdest fucking shit I've ever seen in my entire life. I remember two things. I remember walking outside and suddenly seeing a enormous fleet of vintage
They were World War II era.
cars.
Rolls Royce.
A fleet of them, not like 7 or 8, like maybe
Like a block.
60,
An entire block.
like I
Whoa.
don't know, 60, 100, just like nothing but like vintage cars.
And they weren't
Okay.
vintage like your dad's Pinto. It was
No,
Rolls Royce.
I don't think I saw them before the gig, so I was like, wait, where the fuck did these cars come from? And there were so many of them.
Those cars were not built for space back in the day. I mean, you hold like 3 or 4 people. You need at least
Wow.
10 of them just to get the first few tables out.
But it was just the amount of activity happening after the gig. I've never seen anything like it.
We weren't allowed to leave the area until the parade was cleared. They were saying that no, everyone has to wait until Mr. X exits the building. I mean,
That's
what do you
odd.
mean I can't leave?
Yeah.
The gig's
Right.
over. Am I under arrest?
I was using Facebook as my own personal blogging space. It was usually late at night.
After like a half a bottle of vodka.
Yeah, at least. And yeah, I guess I got on this jag about writing. It sort of comes from our band leader of our band that we work in. He had played at the Kennedy Center. He sent us a text. He said, Led Zeppelin is here. President Obama is here. But
I'm miserable.
it's still jobbing. And then he wrote hashtag everything is jobbing.
You know what's funny about that hashtag? I'm sure you guys have noticed this on Facebook. Being in the music world, is that somehow, I think Zoey started using that hashtag everything is jobbing.
Mhm.
But even though Dan was the first person I'd ever heard say that, and now it is literally something that everybody says on Facebook. Dan, this is before Dan was on Facebook. He just recently joined within the last year or two.
Right.
True.
So for like 10 years, people are like, everything is jobbing. And
It became a meme.
I have written 17 new pieces of music for my jazz quintet, which P-Dub plays in, Pat plays
Yeah.
in. Oh, that's the Nia Quintet.
Mhm.
We are at every least populated venue in town. So
Yeah.
if you need to go hang somewhere where you want to be alone, come see us play. No, it's Nia Quintet, and I don't know. That's what I focused on. We were out of work. I mean, everybody's out of work. The stimulus check ran out, within whatever, I don't know, 6 or 7 hours. I needed to find something to do, and I honestly have had like a creative block for years. I haven't written any new music since the last record, and then the last record was it's going on a while now. Actually, what did it for me was I figured out what happened. I watched, my wife and I watched the Michelle Obama documentary one evening, and everything about it was the most incredible thing that you could possibly imagine. Everybody was happy. They would show the rallies, and everyone was like happy and saying like, yes, we can, and everyone was so hopeful. It wasn't a bunch of like bearded, bloated gravy seals like yelling with Nazi flags about how they're
Gravy
losing their country. Like, what is happening? So I think my writer's block came from just because every day, right? every day. Sometimes like 5, 10, 15 times a day, there would be some tweet. And of
Oh
course,
yeah, there's no space.
The news would just be like, Trump said that bleach will cure COVID, and it's people are dying because they're drinking. Like, you just couldn't get away from any of it.
Yeah.
And I watched this this documentary, and there was a Kirk Franklin tune. This gospel tune was on that Michelle Obama was listening to, and it just made me feel so good. And I transcribed it, and I said, we're going to do this with the band. I love it. And then I kind of transcribed it and arranged it for us. And then, I don't know, every day I just sat down and had a new idea. Just kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, all genres. I don't do classical, but I do all other genres. I never did remote guitar lessons until I had to learn how to do it because of COVID.
Sure.
And sometimes it actually works out pretty okay. So I'm still able to do that somewhat. I don't have a overall philosophy other than I try to be a better guitar teacher to people than my own teachers were when I was a kid. I actually am doing a few gigs here and there. I shouldn't be, but I need to. Like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
If you offer me a gig, I still sort of have to do it. My recurring anxiety dream is usually I have a gig somewhere. The gig is really far away, or fairly far away, but I have like 8 hours to get there, so that's fine. It's going to be fine. And then I lost my guitar. Where's my guitar? I don't own a guitar anymore. I sold all my guitars. My car broke down.
There's truth in that.
I've had to sell a few guitars.
Both of those, sold your guitars, car breaking down. I mean,
I've had to sell a few guitars over the years. Oh, now there's only 1 hour to get to the gig, and it's 2 hours away. Oh, now I'm late. Oh, now the band leader's calling me because how come I'm not at the gig? And all that happens within 10 seconds, probably.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's my recurring. I can't get to where I need to be, and then sometimes it ends up being I have to run to my gig, so I have to like physically run on the highway. But I find that I'm able to make huge strides when I run. So then I realize that like running actually is just as efficient as driving, and somehow I'm able to run like Neo in the Matrix. So sometimes that happens too. It's kind of a mixed bag. It's like anxiety, but then I discover superpowers.
I do have a recurring dream.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's horrible, and it's anxiety ridden, as Zoe's is, but he has a light at the end of the tunnel, whereas I do not.
That kind of sums it up.
Yeah, I mean, our personalities speak to that as well. The problem is, so usually what it is I'm in my dream. It's always a small group performance, and I'm playing pretty much the best I've ever played. Just fantastic. That kind of dream you have where you're like, man, if I could wake up and do that, I would be a happy man. And the alarm goes off, but I'm a really heavy sleeper. I mean, you would have to probably like roll me out of the bed to wake me up so that I landed on the floor. So the alarm goes off for a while, just bink, 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 and I have that like nuclear alarm sound. It's so loud because I have to wake myself up, but I just can't. And so it's going off. So like during my solo in my dream, I start meek, 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 and I'm just jamming. But then I realize that I'm lost. And you have to understand the paradox here. It's like I'm taking the best solo of my life, and I don't know where I am.
Where you are.
I'm completely lost. And there's all of the things that you suffer and deal with, or not, I guess people don't necessarily suffer with it, but a lot of people can suffer with, anxiety, just like stage fright,
Sure.
just fear of being judged by your peers, like everything that you do when you play. And
You're
out there trying
naked. You're like, wait,
just
why am I
eat it.
naked?
Yeah, it's like it's everything. It all comes into play, and everyone's watching me. Everyone knows I'm folding. Everybody thinks I suck. You sound like crap. Your best friend hates you. It just starts to snowball.
That's actually how I feel most of the time when I'm actually playing a gig in real life.
So it's pretty much that. I mean, that's what it is. And then eventually I wake up and, I'm in cold sweats and like lost 10 pounds, and then I feel better. think the most interesting person I've met, I feel like because I played the Green Mill for so long, I played for a lot of celebrities. There would always be some, not always, but a lot. There would always be somebody that Vince Vaughn was a regular. He would always come there. Everybody hated him. All the staff and the bartenders, they were just like, oh God. We had maybe our first or second break, and I see Paul Giamatti sitting at one of the little curved booths. I think it was the one that Al Capone used to sit at. It was the one that's kind of right off the bar with its back to the stage. And he was just holding an unlit cigarette because they had just passed that ban where you can't smoke inside. And he just kept holding it all night and all night. And I was like, get back on the bandstand and like nudge the guy next to you, like, hey, dude, you see the Paul Giamatti? And you just kind of talk about the celebrities or whatnot. But I had to use the bathroom. So like in the middle of the set, I got up during a song I didn't have to play on. And I went to the bathroom and he was in the bathroom. So we kind of nestled up to each other because the Green Mill bathroom was about the size of a phone booth.
Yeah, it's pretty small.
Like, you're shoulder to shoulder with the person next to you, and it just happened to be Paul. And he was still holding that cigarette.
While he's peeing?
He was just, because he's got like his hand up on the wall, right? He's like kind of leaning in, and he's got that cigarette like in between his fingers. And I'm like, what are you doing with your cigarette, dude? And he's like, well, I'm trying to quit smoking, so I just hold it all the time now. And I'm like, does that work? And he's like, well, not really, but I'm trying. And then I was like, well, you think you got it, bet I have to play with this shitty band all night. And he's like, well, everybody's got to pay their dues.
Years ago, I was playing, we used to do every Monday night at Phyllis's. And it was me and the other Scott Anderson, the guitar player.
Oh, yeah, that
and
guy.
Brian Murray, who's the sax player, and Corey Radford. And there was never anybody there. I mean, two people, the bartender,
And
maybe
one
one
other
or two
person.
other people. So every once in a while, somebody would show up. But we were just doing it for fun. And I remember one night, I think it was Corey, the drummer, Corey Radford, said to me, he's like, you know what? We can play whatever we want. Nobody's coming. Play what you want. Nobody's coming. Play wrong. It doesn't matter at all. Just play wrong. Because why not? And there is a certain beauty and freedom to that. Just play wrong.
It's more about just abandoning all of those things that we were talking about earlier, those fears that you have.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, why am I in that headspace? There's nobody here.
Yeah.
But even then, Pat, to your point, like it takes me an hour of playing music to be like, okay, I can let that go and just try to have fun with these guys. And then, even then, I'm just like, my flugelhorn sucks, and like I just can't. Can't get
well,
it
it's
together.
I think in order to be creative, you have to have that. You have to give a shit, but you also have to be able to not give a shit, and that's a real challenge. You have to really try about things that nobody else cares about, and be okay with it when they don't care about it, to the place where it's like, oh, I did it. It happened in the moment.
That's the essence of the struggle that we are in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's it.
Yep.
And you realize, there are no gigs now, so nobody's coming.
Well,
better time.
Do what
nobody's
you want.
coming.
Better time.
I feel like, all of us are feeling kind of disconnected from our music family, which is such a big part of our lives, right?
Yeah, the community is like, small, but like kind of big. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's like
very
small,
much.
big. But
And it's not just
like, it's
the
really
community.
important to us. Like that
It is.
solidarity that we have is like
Uh-huh.
a huge part of what we do.
Because
Yeah.
we don't just go to work and then come home and live our lives with our family and have our weekends free. It's like our social life, our work, they're all interconnected.
We'd like to thank our talented and funny guests, Zoey Witz and Scott Anderson, for joining us. And remember, #everything is jobbing. We're sending you on your way with a song from Scott Anderson's group, the Nia Quintet. Today's episode is brought to you by Anchor. If you're enjoying the Weird Gig podcast, click subscribe on our YouTube page, like us on Facebook, and learn more about our show and our wacky musician guests at weirdgig.com. You can email us comments, suggestions, at info@weirdgig.com. The Weird Gig podcast theme music was written by Kara Kesselring, performed by Kara Kesselring, Patrick Williams, and Vance Okrashevsky. And tell your friends and neighbors about our podcast. They don't have to be musicians to enjoy the show. Join us next week as we discover new tales of a gigging musician. And remember, come for the story, stay for the weird.